Can you hear us? Awesome. Perfect.
Well, are we ready? Good morning, dear Anand Singh, and with my co-host here, Anika Pampal.
Hi.
Welcome you to Digital Davos, and thank you sincerely for taking the time to speak with us. For those of you who don't know who Dia is the UN Environmental Ambassador. She's also the Secretary General Advocate for the SDGs, and an accomplished actor and everything in Bollywood. She has won beauty contests, she has done all sorts of things, and we are lucky to have her to give her opinions on the environment. Anika?
I'm really excited. Would you mind getting us started right into the midst of it?
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure. Thank you. I'm very glad we're having this conversation.
Thank you so much. When we look at the environment, it seems like a one big thing. What do you think are the most important issues within this whole global thing we call the environmental issues of today?
Well, at the foremost is the climate emergency that we're all collectively experiencing. Climate is changing rapidly. The science has been warning us about most of what we're experiencing. And unfortunately, the world just did not pay heed to what the science was saying. But thankfully now, I think more people than perhaps ever before are acknowledging the science and have agreed that it is a question of our survival. It's a question of our well-being. It's a question of hope for all people and the planet to act on climate and do everything that we can to restore the balance of nature. And I think, you know, for the most part, for a very long time, most people have perceived the health of the environment as separate from human health. I think what the pandemic has given us evidence of is the fact that the health of the environment and human health are completely connected. And how we treat our ecosystems, how we treat nature, how we treat the planet is what is going to impact our present and future.
I have another question. In your speech to the UN, you spoke specifically about India being on the forefront of solar energy and clean energy in that regard. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, at the recently concluded COP26, we had India pledging to net zero, which I think is very important. India has also upped its already impressive installed renewable capacity target from 450 gigawatts to 500. And, you know, we've committed to 50% of its energy from renewable sources by 2030 and a reduction of emissions by 1 billion tons and emissions intensity of the GDP by 45% by 2030. This is a powerful commitment. India was at the forefront at, you know, bringing together and ensuring the World Solar Alliance. And when we talk about, you know, switching to renewability and encouraging more countries to adopt renewable energy, India definitely is looking to, you know, stand by this completely.
Wonderful.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about the commitments that have been made, and India certainly has done a tremendous job with thought leaders such as yourself, the administration, but thinking about more the youth and engagement from the youth, what are your thoughts for young people in India and around the world about making climate top priority?
And how to move the needle on public policy and how to involve it.
Yeah, you know, Anand, Anika, I think young people have played a very powerful role in improving public awareness on climate change. Take, for example, the incredible movement led by Greta Thunberg and the participation of young people in the Fridays for Future movement globally. I know this much for sure that when the, you know, there are any new provisions made or any amendments created for any policy connected to the environment, young people are at the forefront, deliberating, understanding, questioning, and seeking positive change. And I don't think that any progress can be made if we don't include young people, because I think young people are holding everyone accountable. Greta said it in her very famous speech where she said, our house is on fire. And if we don't act on that and we don't move with the urgency that is required to fix the state of affairs right now in the world, I don't know what else is any good, And I think what is also very credible and something that we must celebrate is not only are young people becoming very powerful advocates for the climate and are, very powerful activists, but they're also leading with innovation and interventions. And this to me is, represents the most powerful aspect of what the youth are doing. We all know that we are in the midst of a sixth mass extinction that has been created by our human actions and has led to the catastrophes that we're experiencing, whether it's the intense frequency and intensity of droughts, floods, forest fires, so young people are impacted the most, and it is their duty, their right, and it's really about their present and future that they're questioning and holding policy accountable. When we talk about how that impacts policy, I have seen a change within my country in the way homes function. Young people come back home when they learn about the sustainable development goals, when they learn about the impacts of environmentally degrading materials, things that we use in our everyday lives. And they go back home and they question the way their families make choices. They change the way they live. They're implementing waste management systems. They're creating circular economies. They're really working on solutions at a personal, individual level. And that, I think, is going to impact the way mindsets are shaped. People function every day. There's a very powerful campaign that we launched in India called Beat Plastic Pollution. And it really questions the mindless use of single-use plastics. And it's really young people who have turned the tide on plastic, who have led by personal choice and have questioned and changed the way, choices are made at home. And I think that this is a very small example, but there are many, many examples of young people across the world and in India who are, at the forefront demanding change.
Talking about what we're doing, there's a very morbid joke, and it says that we are building Garbage Island as a monument to our own destruction in the middle of the Pacific. Yet in India, we're seeing young people change that by not using straws and not using plastic bags, not to mention that there is a secondary economy for recycling. And it seems like that's a very credible solution to a global problem, where we think of in the West especially as waste is waste, but in India it actually can be monetized. So can you expand a little bit on that?
Anand, I think it's important for us to understand something very simple. We are the only species on the planet that creates waste, and a waste that is not natural. And unfortunately, many industries have contributed to the rise in waste, but have not accounted for the waste and have not been held accountable for that waste. So I think one of the most important things that we're working on and we're hoping that governments will implement is something called an extended producer's responsibility. So if you are a company that is delivering, I don't know, food and beverage or any other goods that we consume on a daily basis that is packaged in plastic, it is your job and your not just your moral responsibility, but should be your personal responsibility to be accountable for that waste. Anand, you're very astute in pointing out to the fact that a lot of this waste can be monetized, but there needs to be systems implemented. When we lead beach cleanup drives, and we see young children participate in these drives, and they see their, their chips wrappers or their biscuit wrappers or sanitary napkins or diapers, things that they would unthinkingly use and throw and never wonder where it's going to go. These exercises, this physical experience of actually plowing out plastic from the beaches has helped them understand that this really has nowhere to go, and we need to hold every person accountable for it. And it starts with personal action. And I think a big part of the movement to beat plastic pollution will include personal action, which is a refusal of plastic, single-use plastic straws or single-use plastic bags or cutlery, or many of the other items which many more people now in the world are hopefully going to completely stop using.
Let's talk about media trust and skepticism towards global warming and, anything that has to do with the destruction of our planet, because there seems to be half of the world that doesn't want to believe it's a real thing.
How can they not believe it, Anika? I find it so strange, right? There is just so much evidence around us every day. It's not 20 years ago, if somebody said that the glaciers are melting, it felt like a distant imagery that was intangible, that we didn't experience, that we didn't quite comprehend or understand. But today, as we know it, water levels are diminishing, our water bodies, all of our natural water bodies, fresh water sources are polluted with plastic, and are depleting rapidly. Like I mentioned, we are witnessing extreme weather events, which that is being photographed and videographed, and people are sharing it. And I really want to paint I think this is a very practical imagery that nature gave us, right? When the global lockdowns occurred, nature looked like it was beginning to heal. The most polluted cities in the world suddenly had cleaner air than they had had in the last 2 decades. For example, you could see the Himalayas from the Punjab, which is a state that has some of the most polluted cities in the world. So when the air got cleaner and we saw wildlife reoccupying areas that they had completely left before, and we breathed better, we felt better, and even though we were in the midst of a really debilitating crisis, we somehow recognized that nature is a self-repairing system. It's wonderful, it's healing, but so much of it has changed because of the way we've treated it. And all those people who don't believe that climate change is real are living in complete denial and are hugely responsible for the destruction and devastation we are experiencing. And we need to change that. Every one of us needs to change that.
I have a quick follow-up. Sorry. I have a follow-up on the 2030 agenda. Poverty is, top number one. And we have seen a decline in poverty worldwide until the pandemic started. It is, now risen by 7%, the extreme poverty. And I wonder, did the pandemic also affect how we now see climate change as a priority? Or do you think that that image of cleaner cities has done enough for us to focus more on that first, instead of a pandemic, the global crisis, poverty? How do you feel about this?
It's all interlinked, right? You can't separate one from the other. So the pandemic was evidence of the fact that we need to treat our ecosystems with more respect. We need to stop wildlife trade. We need to stop removing species that belong to certain areas and take them somewhere else, because that's just going to create havoc like it has. But that aside, I think what the pandemic has done for all of us is help us realize the interconnection between every sustainable goal with climate action, which is goal 13. If we don't act on climate, we cannot build sustainable cities. We cannot achieve zero poverty. We cannot ensure gender equality, because climate change and environmental degradation impacts human health and well-being and peace and progress. And there's no simpler way of saying this. I mean, this is as simple as it can get. So it's all interconnected. And unfortunately, I was mind blown when I read the report submitted by Oxfam a few days ago at Davos about the inequalities that have risen through this pandemic. And if the fractures of our societies have deepened because of this pandemic, and climate change has not halted, it is continuing, we need to recognize that there is no way we can make any progress unless we work together to arrest climate change, to act on climate, and of course, build back more resilience and build back better from this pandemic.
Yeah, so continuing with that discussion a little bit, species extinction is to me one of the top agendas that we look at. And when we look at species extinction, we think of tigers and pandas and all this sort of stuff, but here we are losing a huge amount of species, whether it's in the whether it's in the ocean, and to the point where we're talking about algae depletion in the ocean. So therefore, we won't have any oxygen generation, since that is our biggest producer of oxygen. What are your thoughts about this? Again, climate being such a large subject, one tends to kind of get lost in one portion or the other. How do you make this kind of a global pitch of saying, look, it doesn't matter where you are, this is here and we are in it?
I always look to Jane Goodall when I need to be hopeful. And I don't think there could be a better example of an advocate who helps us understand how terrible things are and where we are. I mean, we've caused 70% species extinction and how bad that is. But what her book suggests, and I recommend everybody read it, Hope, is that when we think about climate change in the global context, it can be terrifying and debilitating. And if you act from any place of empathy, it can really break you. And my advice to everyone who wants to act on climate would be, know the facts, speak the truth, but think of everyday actions that you can make. And some of them could be as simple as managing your own resources better, whether it is switching to a more sustainable lifestyle, taking shorter baths, switching to energy efficient appliances, switching to LED bulbs from CFLs, refusing single-use plastics, converting your celebrations to more sustainable ones, managing your waste better, consuming less fast fashion, knowing really what it is that you're using every day and asking yourself, how does this impact the planet? How does this help, impact the health of the planet? And if the answer is it's bad, then refuse it. Supporting organizations that work for the conservation of biodiversity and nature, defend the defenders, support the defenders, fund the defenders. I personally have started backing organizations and investing in companies that are more sustainable. And all of the choices that I've just, expressed are ones that I'm making at an individual level. And all of this helps me, honestly, just feel a little less guilty about where we find ourselves in the world, and a little more hopeful that if more people, like, for example, if 7 million mothers around the world decided to become climate warriors, we could make such a big difference. Choosing biodegradable diapers or cloth diapers over the regular ones that are plastic based, choosing to use better menstrual health options like biodegradable sanitary napkins, knowing that the regular ones are mostly made of plastics. These are choices that I think can really make a big difference. And when we talk about the sustainable development goals, I think this is not something for just big industries and companies and governments to adopt. Individuals can also adopt these goals and use it as a North Star, as goals that they want to implement in their daily lives.
You do a lot of social work and social outreach. And, from our position, we're very privileged. We're in a first world country. There's a lot we get to do, and that is an option, choice for us. But in underserved communities, that is not necessarily the case. What's most needed in India in those underserved communities? What can we do as a society to support that in an environmental friendly way?
Right now, the most terrifying outcome of the pandemic has been many things, but I think the topmost for me would be the fact that many, many young children have dropped out of school and don't have access to education. I think if providing education and access to education to these children becomes a priority for all of us, we can help make a very big difference. Because while we need to continue doing all the work we need to protect the environment and serve the planet better, we also need to ensure our children are going to school. And there are many programs that are running in the country right now to make school education accessible to young children. We've lost, young girls especially have dropped out of school. And this needs to very quickly be addressed and changed.
Continuing on education, do you think it should be a subject that we should be learning in school at this point, since we have an emergency? This is akin to the pandemic, where children at young ages should be taught about this and their lives guided to a better planet, to a better world, to sustainability, to all the subjects that we've talked about. I'd love to hear your opinions on the need for education at primary levels.
Oh, absolutely, Anand. There's no question about it. Ignorance is what led us where we are, right? Ignorance, avarice, ego has led us to the injustices that we're experiencing in the world today. And the only way that this can be rooted out is by educating and empowering young children on, nature-based solutions, understanding the climate, understanding how to work with the earth. And for all of the schools that have adopted climate studies and environmental studies, we already see a big change in the choices they're making, in the way they're living, in the way they're influencing their homes and their parents and their communities, and the solutions they're coming up with. So I think it can lead to a massive change, which is why, Anand, I feel a lot of the change that we need to see in the world today has to be driven by political will. Because it's only when governments changed and our politicians change that will percolate into the way we function as societies. That is what will lead to how industries work, how schools work, how institutions work. And unless and until, a young person said this to me recently. They said, unfortunately, the climate agenda is not a part of the electoral mandate. It doesn't feature in vote bank politics, and we need to change that. And I really think that young people are doing that. I'd like to take Maharashtra as an example. It was one of the first few states in India to make environment a part of their electoral agenda. And we're already seeing the positive changes that is leading to. And I hope that it inspires many more states and many more governments worldwide to do so.
There is a lot of conversation. We recently had a conversation with Sonam Wangchuk and his philosophy on climate change and the effects that global climate change has on communities such as Ladakh. Global environmental emergency and the work that he's doing and others around India and around the world. There are so many unsung or underappreciated heroes. How do we bring these people to the forefront? Why are we not looking at them as the best things?
We need to highlight their stories. And that's where people like you and me come forward, right? We talk about them, we celebrate them, we share their work with the people. Sonam's work is absolutely awe-inspiring. And like him, there are many others in India and the world over, like you mentioned, doing incredible work. I'd like to also touch upon the fact that, you know, India is such an ancient civilization. We've known for centuries how to live with the earth and how to manifest its best outcomes without being disrespectful, degrading, and polluting. Another person whose work I really admire from India is Vandana Shiva. She is a powerful voice of change. She's somebody who talks about how industrial agriculture has colonized the planet and has polluted it. But not only has it polluted it, it has also what you call desertified soil, basically made soil dead. And what she's doing in Uttarakhand in India is teaching people how to grow and harvest and create agricultural systems that work with natural systems without polluting the planet and causing erosion of soil. Her narrative, her story, her advice, her interventions are so powerful. If only the world could adopt all of them. But I mean, you know, honestly, we don't talk enough about desertification. 2/3 of the planet's soil is dead because of the way we've grown food. And we need to change that. It's actually one of the biggest interventions that can reduce climate change and in fact be a huge, huge tool of climate action.
So coming back to some of the things that you do so much. How do you feel about your efforts? There is, of course, I see hope in your eyes. I see this fire, this spark about wanting to change things. Do you think that you have made an impact?
Well, I hope I do. I know that 10 years ago, we struggled to make the science mainstream. We struggled to be heard, to be seen. But today, the struggle continues, but it's not as bad as it was before. I think more and more people have an improved consciousness of the environment, of what we're doing to the planet. The narrative on sustainability is gathering momentum in India. I feel like I may have a small part to play with that. But more than anything else, the only thing I have is hope. And when I see my infant baby look at the world with wonder and those flowers and plants that sway, and I see him smile, I believe that the work that is being done by people today should reverse the effects that we have created and caused on the environment. And we should be able to fix this. We have a very small window of opportunity. That is what is terrifying. But I really believe in good. And I really believe that there are enough good people in this world, and we will bring the change we need.